Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Our mission here is to take your highly specific, intensely curious questions, run them through a stack of sources, and deliver some real, actionable insights.
And today we are focusing on a question from Elton. He's 71, a stroke survivor, and has just an amazing, mostly plant-based diet. I mean, he's getting over 50 grams of fiber a day.
That's incredible. But he zeroed in on his daily ritual, and it's causing a bit of a dilemma.
Yeah, it's a really common one in the dairy-free world. He mixes Trader Joe's unsweetened cashew yogurt and so delicious unsweetened vanilla coconut yogurt.
Right, with berries on top. And he's doing it for gut health, but he's run into some complex nutritional trade-offs.
Exactly. So he's given us 3 core questions that really need a deep dive. First, the big one, saturated fat versus calories. Which base, cashew, or coconut is actually healthier for a stroke survivor?
Okay. Then second, he's taking these for the active bacteria, but we need to check if there are any, hidden ingredients that might be working against his gut health goals.
And finally, the fear that I think we all have is the yogurt itself, even a plant-based one, binding up and just canceling out all the good stuff, the antioxidants, in his berries.
Okay, let's unpack this. We had to start with that first question, the big one, the cashew versus coconut macronutrient showdown.
And the confusion here is, it's completely understandable. You've got 2 products on the shelf. They look similar, but their nutritional profiles are just drastically different.
Right, and Elton noticed that the coconut one is lower in total calories and total fat, which, at first glance, that looks like the winner.
It usually does, but he correctly flagged that it has more saturated fat.
And that seems to be the critical detail.
It's the whole story. When we look at the data for that specific, so delicious yogurt, a 3/4 cup serving has 5 grams of total fat.
Okay.
4.5 of those grams are saturated fat.
Wow, so nearly all of it. And what does 4.5 grams actually mean in a daily context?
It's a lot. That single serving you're having delivers about 23% of your entire daily recommended value for saturated fat.
23%. For someone prioritizing cardiovascular health, that is a huge chunk from, what's supposed to be a light snack.
It is. So why is coconut such an outlier? We always hear that plant-based is low in saturated fat.
Yeah, that's the common wisdom.
And it's usually true. General studies confirm that, your almond, your soy, your cashew-based yogurts, they're typically very low, often under a gram of saturated fat.
But not coconut.
Coconut is the glaring exception.
Yeah.
Some of those can have 10, even 12 times the saturated fat of the other nut-based ones.
So the cashew yogurt that Elton's using, even though it's a bit higher in calories, probably falls into that low saturated fat group.
It almost certainly does. This is a quality of fat issue, not a quantity issue.
The quality of fat issue. I like that.
Yeah. The cashew alternatives typically have almost no saturated fat. The fat they do have is mostly monounsaturated, which is actually beneficial for heart health.
So you're trading a few extra calories for a massive drop in the problematic type of fat.
Exactly.
Let's get into the weeds on that.
Yeah.
Why is coconut saturated fat so problematic, especially for Elton? You mentioned he'd read some bad things about it.
The primary reason is the specific molecular structure of that fat. Coconut oil is uniquely rich in something called lauric acid.
Lauric acid.
Right. And while it's often marketed as, a healthy medium-chain triglyceride, studies clearly link it to raising your LDL cholesterol.
The bad cholesterol.
The bad cholesterol. So it's directly targeting the very marker that a stroke survivor is actively trying to manage and keep as low as possible.
It seems completely counterproductive then.
It is. If your goal is aggressive cardiovascular protection, regularly getting 23% of your saturated fat limit from one small product is just not a good strategy.
So given that his half-and-half mix means he's choosing to eat 4.5 grams of this lauric acid-rich fat every day, what's the verdict on the trade-off?
I think the choice is clear. If the main goal is minimizing saturated fat for long-term health, the cashew yogurt is the significantly stronger base. The small calorie difference is, frankly, negligible compared to the saturated fat you avoid.
That settles it. Lean into the cashew. Okay, now let's shift to the whole reason Elton is eating yogurt in the first place. Gut health.
Right. He's already getting tons of protein and fiber, so he's focused on the active cultures.
Which is a great move.
A fantastic move. And here, both the coconut and the cashew yogurts are winners. They both have active bacteria, probiotics, using the same species you'd find in dairy yogurt, like lactobacillus.
So that basic goal of, getting good bacteria into the gut, that's being met.
It is. But then you have the second part of gut health, which is feeding those bacteria.
The prebiotics.
The prebiotics, exactly. And the fiber in these products does that job. For instance, delicious coconut product lists rice starch pectin and locust bean gum.
Okay, I've seen those on labels.
Pectin and locust bean gum are forms of dietary fiber. They're specifically food for those active cultures.
Okay, here is where it gets really interesting. Because we have to talk about the things that are added for texture, not for health. The hidden gut wreckers.
This is such a critical check for any processed food, and the plant-based aisle is not immune. You're looking for thickeners and emulsifiers that are just there for mouthfeel.
And some of them can actually undermine gut health.
They absolutely can, especially with regular consumption.
So what are the specific ingredients Elton needs to be scanning for on those labels?
There are two main culprits to watch out for. The first is called polysorbate 80.
Polysorbate 80.
It's a common emulsifier. And research links it to decreasing your beneficial bacteria and potentially feeding pathogenic bacteria, which can lead to low-level inflammation.
And what's the second one? Sounds even more intimidating.
That would be carboxymethylcellulose. You'll usually just see it as CMC or cellulose.
Right.
This one's a thickener. And studies show it can trigger immediate gut inflammation by basically messing with the gene expression in your gut bacteria.
It actually changes how the bacteria function.
Yes, and it causes them to overproduce a protein called flagellin.
Flagellin, what does that do?
Think of it like a tiny alarm bell going off all over your digestive tract. It signals to your gut lining that something is wrong, and that signal leads directly to inflammation and irritation.
So we have two types of thickeners here. We've got the good guys, pectin and locust bean gum, which are actually beneficial fiber.
Right, they're allies.
And then we have these synthetic chemicals like CMC and polysorbate 80 that are just texture agents that actually irritate the gut.
That's a perfect summary. They're adversaries in the gut.
So Elton needs to check his Trader Joe's cashew label very carefully. But the delicious coconut label you mentioned, it seems like he's dodged a bullet on that one.
It appears so, yes. The ingredients listed there are the fiber-based ones, but you have to keep checking. Formulations can change.
Okay, excellent. Now for the third big question, and I think this is one that worries everyone who loves a smoothie or a yogurt bowl. The berry binding effect.
This concern is so valid, and it's rooted in some pretty traumatic science.
So let's start with why the berries are so important in the first place, especially for Elton.
Berries, especially blueberries and strawberries, are just packed with compounds called anthocyanins.
Those are the bright colors, right? The reds and blues.
Exactly. They are powerful antioxidants, and they've been specifically linked to cardiovascular benefits, like reducing the risk of high blood pressure.
You don't need to eat a ton of them, do you?
No, the dose is surprisingly small. Studies suggest you can see benefits from the equivalent of just 6 strawberries or maybe 11 blueberries a day.
That's amazing. So why would yogurt, of all things, ruin this?
The problem historically comes from dairy protein.
Okay.
Studies have shown that when you mix berries with milk products, the proteins in the milkway and casein, they literally grab on to the anthocyanins and stop your body from absorbing them.
How bad is the effect? Is it just a small reduction?
No, it can be catastrophic. Some studies found that mixing blueberries with dairy milk actually resulted in less antioxidant capacity in the person's bloodstream than before they even ate.
Wait, less. So it's a net negative.
It effectively abolishes the benefit. You might as well not have eaten the berries if they're covered in dairy yogurt.
That is just a terrible outcome. But Elton is using cashew and coconut. So does this dairy protein problem apply to his plant-based yogurts?
This is the absolute key finding for you, Elton. Researchers looked at this. They compared dairy whey protein to plant proteins, specifically pea and hemp.
And what did they find? Did the plant proteins bind less?
Well, this is where it gets counterintuitive. They found that all of the proteins, whey, pea, and hemp, formed complexes with the blueberry polyphenols. The binding happens no matter what.
Hold on. If the plant proteins bind just as well, maybe even more strongly, as some research hinted, isn't that actually worse news for Elton?
That's the right question. But the key is what happens after the binding, during digestion. In the studies, even though the plant proteins had a strong binding affinity, the complexation did not disrupt protein digestion.
So the protein still breaks down normally.
Precisely. And this suggests a completely different way of looking at it. Instead of the plant proteins acting as a permanent blocker, like dairy seems to, they might actually be a delivery mechanism.
A delivery mechanism. How would that work?
They could be escorting the polyphenols through your stomach, protecting them from stomach acid, and then releasing them later on for absorption.
That is a stunning conclusion. It means his cashew and coconut yogurts are likely not sabotaging his berries at all. They might actually be helping them.
The plant base is absolutely working in your favor here. Your risk of significant nutrient blocking is minimal compared to using dairy yogurt. You can keep the ritual.
That is a huge relief. Okay,
Yeah.
last question, and it's a very specific one. Elton asks, can I pour apple cider vinegar or something on the berries to protect them?
That's a fascinating idea, and it comes from a real chemical principle. Those anthocyanins, the pigments, are naturally more stable in an acidic environment, so the theory makes sense.
But is there any data showing it works in this specific context to stop protein binding?
Unfortunately, no. The source material we looked at doesn't provide a consensus on that. While it might help stabilize the compounds in general, we can't recommend it as a proven hack for this specific protein interaction.
Fair enough. We stick to the evidence.
Good.
So let's bring it all home. Give Elton the clear path forward. Mix or go all in on one.
The path forward is really driven by that single most significant factor for your long-term health, Elton, which is the saturated fat.
So that means
It means you should switch to the cashew yogurt as your primary, if not sole, base. The coconut yogurt has 4.5 grams of saturated fat, which is 23% of your daily value.
it's just too high.
It's too high. Switching to the cashew is the nutritionally strongest choice for your cardiovascular health. And we'd strongly recommend you just double check the label on your specific Trader Joe's cashew yogurt, just to be sure it's as low as we expect.
So less coconut, more cashew, driven by the lauric acid concerns.
Correct. On gut health, both are doing a good job with the cultures and the prebiotic fiber. So that's a win as long as you keep checking those labels for things like CMC.
And the berries, the habit is safe.
Absolutely, 100%. The key takeaway is the really bad binding effect is strongly linked to dairy proteins. Because you're using a plant base, you're either minimizing that negative impact, or even better, you might be using the plant proteins as a helpful transporter.
That's a phenomenal summary. So Eldon, it sounds like your instincts were right, but the science says to lean fully into the cashew base, minimize that saturated fat, and definitely keep the berries coming.
And here's one last kind of provocative thought to leave you with. We tend to see protein binding as a bad thing, as nutrient theft. But this research suggests that those plant proteins might actually be playing a crucial protective role. Imagine them as tiny bodyguards, shielding those delicate berry compounds from stomach acid, making sure they survive the journey to be released and absorbed where they can do the most good.
So your yogurt isn't the enemy of the berries. It's their ally.
It could be their ally in maximizing nutrient delivery, a completely different way to think about it.
That is a powerful idea. Thanks for diving deep with us today. We'll catch you next time.